If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Logger Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Logger Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good!
Oh, yeah? Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Logger Line starts now.
Welcome aboard. How's it going, everybody? Ben Dubose here, Paolo Alves there. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Logger Line, served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Carbach Brewing. This is the show put on courtesy of Carbach Brewing and Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets, where once per week, we talk all things Houston Rockets or topics related to the Houston Rockets, which is what we're going to be doing on today's show. Again, I'm your host, Ben Dubose, editor of USA Today's Rockets Wire. And on today's show, we've got a special March Madness themed episode on the way. We're recording this Sunday night. The NCAA tournament brackets just got revealed. And of course, that's relevant to the Rockets because we know at this point they're 15-52. They're tied for the worst record in the league right now, I believe. They're certainly going to finish in the bottom three, which assures them of a top 7 pick in the upcoming NBA draft. We've talked a lot about the Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson scenarios. Wembanyama out of France, Scoot Henderson currently playing for the NBA G League Ignite. But let's be honest, those are inherently unlikely. 27% chance, even if you're the worst team, the way the Rockets are right now, of landing a top 2 pick. The odds are 73%. You're going to be somewhere in the 3 to 6 or even 7 range, 7 being the realistic floor, because I don't think the Rockets will fall out of the bottom 3 no matter what they do over this season's final 15 games. So with that in mind, we're going to look at the 73% possibilities and the players that are within that range. And a lot of them are going to be playing in March Madness, in this NCAA men's basketball tournament that begins, well, Tuesday with the play-in games, and then the real thing, the round of 64, starts on Thursday and Friday. So we're going to be taking a look at a lot of players that could be potentially in play for the Rockets if they don't get the first or second pick. Again, Victor or Scoot, those are the dream scenarios, but in some ways it's sort of boring to talk about it because the bottom line is just waiting for the draft lottery. And do you defy the odds? Do you get one of those 27% outcomes? If not, there are lots of other interesting prospects, perhaps a bit flawed relative to Victor or Scoot, but still guys that you would love to add to your young core and potentially could turn into all-star level players. It's just these guys each have questions in a way that Victor and Scoot don't. So I think this is a very good discussion that we can go into some players that aren't being talked about enough on Rockets Twitter because everybody tends to skew towards the high-end outcomes because we all want to dream about Victor or Scoot. The odds are, though, it's probably going to be one of these other guys, and so we're going to be talking about them today. To help Paolo and myself do that, we're joined today by Madison Moore. You may know him best as Madman Leaks on Twitter. He's a Rockets content creator, NBA draft analyst, really sharp basketball mind. This is his first time joining us on the Logger Line. And Madison, thanks so much for taking the time. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here with you guys today.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I mentioned Paolo earlier, our co-host and producer out of Portugal. I think this time a year ago, everybody remembers Paolo being beyond in love with Paolo Banchero of Duke. That was his guy. And of course, it looked like after the Rockets finished third in the draft lottery that he was going to be bound for Houston until the Magic pulled the switcheroo on draft night. Paolo, do you have a Banchero level love this year, or are you still open to being persuaded?
Man, well, why is you gotta break my heart right before the podcast, man? Come on, it just brought all the PTSD back.
Jeez.
No, I'm joking. I'm, I'm slowly kind of like getting out of a relationship. I'm slowly being more open to hurting myself again, right? So nah, I'm joking. I'll be honest with you, I have not been into the draft as much as I was last season. I think last season was a really interesting discussion. But I do have a more o- more overview type of vibe when it comes to most of the prospects we're going to talk about today. If I had to pick one that I particularly like, I mean, everybody loves Wemby, right? And then
Mhm.
there's people who are really into Amen Thompson. There's people who even I think Kevin O'Connor has Brandon Miller, number two. Guys are really into Jarris Walker. I think partly because he is from U of H.
Yeah.
My guy this draft, when he comes to the top 7 picks, is actually Scoot.
Mhm.
I really like him. I think he has. And if there's something that we have realized as we've gone through this rebuild, is that there's a few things that you rarely can teach if you can teach at all. And I think Scoot's feel for the game, Scoot's control of the pace with the control of pace with the basketball, Scoot's ability to make kind of like what I talked about Banchero last year. Scoot's ability to manipulate the defense and basically toy around with them to open up gaps for his passes. And the things that we've been trying to teach Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green that we see that Shingun already has to some extent. I think Scoot's one of the rare prospects at the point guard position that already has that at such a young age, at 19 years old. And that to me is so hard to find that if Wemby was not in this draft, um, and earlier in the year, I even considered arguing for Scoot over Wemby, but it's just not doable in my opinion. Otherwise, I would have done it. But Scoot's definitely my guy that I would place as okay. Personally, I like this guy more than I think consensus does.
Yeah, and I think Scoot is one of those winning intangible guys that's something else that when you mentioned lessons we've learned through the rebuild, those little intangible factors that drive day-to-day culture are perhaps a bit more important than Rockets fans fully appreciated in 2021 when we were first going down this road for really the first time in a generation when it comes to fans of this particular basketball team. Now, of course, we've watched other teams go into rebuilds, but it's different when you're actually truly focused on the day-to-day the way we are with this basketball team. So yeah, one of the things that intrigues me about Scoot is not just his ability as a passer, as a floor general, a Russell Westbrook with a better jump shot, as some have put it. I think it's also what he can bring you in terms of his day-to-day approach and his mindset that would particularly be useful in the context of a lot of the young guys that are currently on this team, perhaps Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason being the exceptions. But again, we're going to save our Scoot discussions for another day because I'm sure leading up to the draft, we'll have plenty of shows. Perhaps we'll do a show just specifically on Scoot and Wimby because there's so much to unpack there. The reality, though, again, that's a 27% outcome that you get one of the top 2 picks, even if you're the worst team in the NBA, which the Rockets are right now at 15 and 52. The 73% outcome is going to be somewhere in the 3 to 5, maybe 6 or 7 if things go really wrong. And then you're going to have a number of guys there. Many of them will be playing in the NCAA tournament this weekend. And so with this being a week in which everybody's looking at the tournament, everybody's filling out their brackets, then we're going to talk about it, but through the lens of the Houston Rockets and beyond just who's likely to win a game. This is going to be, if you're a Rockets fan, what should you be looking for when you evaluate these prospects? And we're going to focus on guys that could conceivably be in the top 7, the likes of Braden Miller of Alabama, Jarris Walker of U of H, Nick Smith Jr. of Arkansas, Keontae George of Baylor. We could talk about Cam Whitmore of Villanova, but Villanova is going to be an NIT team, assuming they don't decline the bid like UNC did. So we'll save him for last if we have time. We're going to focus largely on the guys that are going to be in the NCAA tournament field. And I think, Paolo, one reason that we've probably not been as actively engaged with the draft class this year relative to a year ago, or at least the college draft class, is that in 2022, the top 3 guys were Chet Holmgren, Paolo Banchero, Jabari Smith Jr. And the order shifted a little bit during the year, but we sort of all knew from around the time conference play started in late December that these are the top 3 guys, and they're all playing college basketball. Whereas this year, we've known even before the season started, the top 2 guys are clearly Wemby and Scoot. So when you're the worst team in the league, which the Rockets are, if you're a fan of that, you're inherently thinking about the best case scenario. What if we get that number 1 pick? And I think one reason why a lot of people haven't, including you, Paolo, gone down the road as far this year, whereas last year it was very easy to, look at these college guys and see the high end outcome. In this case, we're probably looking at somewhere in the 3 through 7 range. So I think because of that, maybe that's why we haven't gotten you quite as attached the way you were to Banchero last year. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think a lot of the fun parts of the draft. Well, first of all, as you said, with so many guys at the top that are not college guys, it's a little bit harder to fall in love with someone because it's just confusing. And I know we'll get into it with the Thompson twins and guys that play in different competitions. And the other thing is, the Rockets do have the Clippers pick, right? Which is going to likely be somewhere between 18 and 22, I would say, depending on if they lose in the play, and maybe it will be better. Who knows? And a lot of the fun part of the draft is to look at, after the top, in this case, 7, maybe 8, looking after that and trying to find those hidden gems type guys. Madison is known for finding Jalen Williams before anybody else was talking about it, and look at how good he's panned out for OKC. It's just harder to be motivated to look into those last, not last, but those, late lottery, through the early 20s guys that to me are usually so exciting. I can remember Trey Murphy from 2 years ago. I really liked Jalen Johnson from 3 years ago. Last year, Tari Eason was the guy that everybody wanted. And so those are usually the guys that make you kind of fall in love with the draft class, because the top were expected to be at the top for the most part. And knowing that the Rockets will likely, I would guess that they would likely trade the Clippers pick. And I know as we get more into draft discussion further along the draft cycle, I actually have some arguments towards keeping it versus moving it. But since it's kind of the overwhelming majority of people would say that we are going to move it, it's kind of also harder to fall in love with those guys. It's like we have so many already that you kind of don't want to have that much young talent, and you're kind of going to shed a little bit of the young talent that you already have this offseason. So I think that plays a part in it as well. But moving on to what you were talking about, the NCAA tournament, I think one of the cool questions to ask Madison is, for the top 3 through 7, which the guys that are most that are going to play in the NCAA tournament, is there something that you could see out of them throughout the tournament that would shift the way you're ranking them? I'm talking between Brandon Miller, Jarris Walker, Nick Smith, and I'll add Keontae George in there as well. From those guys, if you had to pick one thing that you could, that you would like to see from their game develop during the NCAA tournament, what would you go with?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's really unfortunate Cam won't be in the tournament, because that was the guy I wanted to see most in this type of scenario. But Nick Smith Jr. will probably be the guy I highlight. Nick Smith Jr. hasn't played a lot this year, and he's been dealing with injuries, and he's flashed when he has played, but I really haven't gotten the breadth of film I'd like to see out of Nick Smith Jr. Ultimately, the thing that I'm looking for Nick Smith Jr. is, does he have floor general point guard skills, right? Like, that's one of the big things about me. For right now, Nick Smith Jr. kind of feels to me like a 3-point shooter who is very shifty. He can catch off the bounce, attack. He doesn't go all the way to the rim and finish, but I think it's okay because his floater is so great. He has one of the best floaters I've ever seen, and he gets to it in very tangible and functional ways that seem sustainable for the next level, right? And for his size, I think that's good for him to have. But I'd like to see his playmaking, his floor setting, right? Because I think at his size, he's interesting as a 2 guard, but I'm not sure his upside may be capped at that size as a wing rather than a point guard who has floor general skills. I think he moves a lot like Tyrese Maxey, but I think their games are different, right? Well, in a sense that Tyrese Maxey as a prospect, his game was as a slashing guard, getting to the rim, putting pressure on the defense in that way. While I think and will shoot and can shoot because of that, right? That's how he's kind of built his game out of, is he's a slasher first who can shoot now at the NBA level. While I think Nick Smith Jr. is the opposite. I think they move very similarly, like where there's shot prep, whether that's getting to the floater. But I think Nick Smith Jr. is primarily a shooter first, right? That leverages his jump shot to create advantages and get into the paint where he makes his floaters, right? And I hope that makes sense, right? Yeah. So for me, I'd like to see from Nick Smith Jr. more playmaking, more floor general skills, and honestly, taking over games down the stretch. One of the big allures of the NCAA tournament is this is their playoffs, right?
Yeah.
When the stakes are the highest, do you shine the brightest, right? Are you a star among stars? And that, as a prospect evaluator, creates a whole nother allure to it. You right now, it's you kind of get to see their edge, the dog we like to talk about in players, right? Do they have it? Do they have the mental capacity to perform on these big stages, right? And so I'd like to see Nick Smith Jr., close games for Arkansas, which I feel like he's kind of waned in and out in a lot of these games, right? I think him and Ricky Council have kind of battled at times for, who takes that shot at the end. And I don't think they get the ball to him enough. So I really like to see him take over games in that aspect as well. Who else? So
you're higher on Keontae George, by the way, than a lot of
right,
people. I
right.
noticed you had him 4th on your board. What do you
Yes,
like
yes.
about him, and what's the kind of thing that he can do in this tournament? By the way, one more quick thing about Nick Smith Jr. He's a guy that you'll get to evaluate very early. Some of these guys that are on 1 seeds, like Jarris Walker in Houston, look, they're not going to play anyone competitive until at least the second round, whereas Arkansas plays Illinois, a very good team, in round 1. If they get past them, you have Kansas in round 2. So Nick Smith is an example of a guy that right off the bat, you'll be able to see game 1 when they play, who is it? Illinois.
Illinois.
Yeah, just how he fares. Baylor is going to be playing UC Santa Barbara. It's a 3-14 matchup, but still, it should be competitive. Keontae George is someone you're higher on in the consensus. You even have him 4th or 5th in your overall rankings, I think. Why are you so bullish on him, and what's the kind of thing that he could do in this tournament that might put more people around the NBA onto him as, legitimately a top 4, top 5 guy? Because I feel like the consensus now has him closer to the back half of the top 10.
Right. So Keontae George, number one, he has an elite trait that all stars in this league have, and it's an underrated thing that honestly I kind of made up myself. But it is important to me when evaluating guys and their upside, and it is the ability to just get hot, just to get on a heater. All-star players, all superstar scorers in this league have that trait. Every single one of them, whether it's Damian Lillard, Stephen Curry, right? They all can get on a heater and get in a type of zone where they're completely unconscious, right? It's very important, I feel like, when evaluating prospects higher end upsides, that they are able to tap into something that, is a little bit more than their peers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Keontae George has that. Now, if you combine that with his quick decision making and pick and roll, passing out of the pick and roll, right? When you combine that with that otherworldly ability to get hot offensively, right? You begin to play with you begin to enter into a different level of prospect for me, right? So one of the things that I value very much is high IQ guys, high processing guards, right? Or just players, period. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people are starting to come around to. It's one of the reasons that I pegged Jalen Williams as, a lottery talent when he was in the second round. He was just an incredible processor of the game. Now, Keontae is nowhere near that level processor, but he is probably out of his archetype of prospect that is scoring guard. And history, Jalen Green is a scoring guard, a part of this archetype, right? He's one of, Devin Booker. It's the list goes on and on and on. He's probably one of the highest ones with the level of pick and roll reads and passing reads that I've seen. And when you combine that with that ability to score in the way that he can, you might be working with, some real magic. Not to mention, he's a really good defender. He gets to the line at a high rate. He uses his body very well, has great body control and balance, right? All of those are like traits of stars. Mm-hmm. And for me, that begins to separate him from your typical lottery pick scoring guard. Those things kind of push him up for me. And for me, after you get out of the top three, I think there's a huge drop off for me, right? And I think he is probably the most likely in my mind to actually reach that all-star level, and it's because of the defensive prowess, the passing. Now the knocks, I don't want to overlook his knocks. His knocks is he's inefficient, right? Right now he's wildly inefficient, right? And his shot selection is poor, but those things go hand in hand. And they're really easy to fix, honestly. You know what I mean? I don't think he's a selfish player. Selfishness is not in the film. He's a confident guy. That's what he is. You know what I mean? And so once he becomes better and starts to understand the game and it slows down for him, he'll be able to pick his spots. And I don't think right now, as of now, he understands how to balance both the playmaking and the scoring. Right. I think once he's on, he's like, oh, I'm scoring. I'm in scoring mode. And then other times he could be in playmaking mode. And so he has to learn how to balance those two. But those are things I think are teachable, or really, teachable things. So that's why I'm so high on Keontae. I think he has the best chance. Not the highest upside, because I think the Twins have higher upsides than him, but I think he has the best chance next to reach that superstar level or all-star level guard in this draft.
I thought it was interesting the way you phrased it, that you said you had a top three and then you had a tier gap. And depending on who you ask, who's your third guy? Is it Brendan Miller or is it Amen Thompson? And if it is Brendan Miller, which is what I guess it will be, what are you looking to get from him in the NCAA tournament?
Let me read your tweet, Madison, because I think this was really telling. You put this out this afternoon. For perspective, Wemby is in the LeBron tier of prospects. These guys come once in a decade. Scoot is in the Zion/AD Anthony Davis tier of prospects. Those prospects come once every other year. Brandon Miller is in the Paolo/Jaw tier, typically one every year. And I think a lot of people aren't fully appreciating Miller because of the two guys in front of him.
Right.
The reality is that Miller easily could have gone number one in 2022, where Banchero, there clearly wasn't a consensus number one. That's why Paolo shocked everybody on draft day by jumping up. And maybe even in 2021. I know Cade was a very good prospect, but he certainly wasn't elite. There were reports that the Pistons were legitimately considering Jalen Green right up until a few hours before the draft. So while Brandon Miller is not considered at the level of Wemby or Scoot by most people, I know there's been some whispers Kevin O'Connor put out there that maybe Miller could challenge Scoot for number two. But I just think because he's not at the level of Wemby, fans aren't really adjusting to the fact that number three in this year's draft could be as good as number one or even better than number one a year ago. It's just based on the strength of the draft class. So for me, and the other thing about Brandon Miller, we should point out, he had an incredible SEC tournament run this weekend against some really good teams. I will throw a shout out to my Missouri Tigers, the only team that even remotely competed with Alabama. Mizzou actually led them with 13 minutes left. It was within 6 with about 5 minutes to go. But Bama just so much length, and with Miller, the shooting, the passing, 6'9", very smooth. By the way, we got to agree, no shot creation puns with Brandon Miller.
Yeah.
But you know where I'm going with this. What distinguishes him from these other guys? Why is he clearly, in your eyes, the top college guy. And, again, it may take until the second weekend because Alabama is a 1 seed. So they're going to play A&M Corpus Christi or Southeast Missouri State and the winner of Maryland, West Virginia in the second round. What is it about his game that has him, I guess, clearly the top college guy, and at this point, the type of prospect that maybe there's a world in which they could even challenge Scoot Henderson for 2? I guess a best way to frame the question, if Brandon wants to actually make a push at some point to try and get to number 2, what are the things he can do in the tournament to really turn heads and make people think, I know he's not the Wemby LeBron level prospect. That's just literally once a generation. But is there something that he can do if he puts the team on his back, carries them to a national title? What are the scenarios where he could even move up higher?
Yeah, so for me, I'm not sure how much ground he can make up, honestly, because I've honestly seen all I needed to see from Brandon Miller, honestly. I just don't know that he is the level of playmaker, and that's what separates him from Scoot to me. Scoot is a otherworldly level playmaker that can beat you with his passing just as well as he can beat you with his scoring. It's just the gap in that, the change of pace, and also the level at which he plays. The G League, that is grown men over there. You know what I mean? That's a different level. And for him to, at a young age, not just this year, but last year, be able to step in that league and dominate in the way that he has, whether it's change of pace, passing, right? And so what I'll say about that, it's not about Brandon Miller. It's really about Scoot, right? So, you know what I mean? It's not, but if there was something that really would make me change my mind, I honestly think he's already starting to enter that, and it's really playmaking, finishing at the rim, and really swaying people's concerns about athleticism. Okay, so for me, Brandon Miller is not going to beat you with his athleticism. He's going to beat you with his change of pace and length. Okay, he can play within a system, and you can throw him the ball and tell him to go get you a bucket. And it's really fun the way Alabama plays. I really want to tip my hat to Nate Oates because I honestly love the system that he runs, right? And a lot of times, and people can watch this in many of the film, Brandon Miller plays off ball the entire first half. Okay, he plays off ball. They run him off screens and these different just sets, and he gets his buckets in transition and just within the flow of the offense, and he's really effective. But in the fourth quarters, they give the ball to him and they spread and they say go to work, and he's able to go to work in those ways too. Brandon Miller is a bit lightweight. He's not very thick or strong right now. That's one of his big knocks, and it affected. To me, wholeheartedly, it affected the way he finished at the rim the first 10 games of the season. But I think it's actually amazing the way that he has corrected that in season. That is so hard. And that's one of the things that I love to see from a prospect. Can you identify an issue within your game and correct it? And he did it in season. And that's super, super impressive, right? And so, like I said, people worry about his athleticism, right? I just more so worry about his strength. But he plays like he is strong. He uses his change of pace. He's not afraid of contact, even though he doesn't draw a lot of fouls, but he does a lot of pump fakes. He's always in control, and that allows him to make playmaking reads because he plays at that slow pace. But a lot of times we can confuse that for being unathletic. Being in control doesn't mean that you're unathletic. Right? You can go through Brandon Miller's film. He has some very athletic plays within it, right? I mean, he had the I don't know what team he played, but he had a two-handed body-to-body dunk out of like a pick and roll. That is just, you don't make that type of play unless you're athletic, right? And it's just is this pace that he's playing at? And it's one of the things I kind of tweeted about this earlier, but Jalen Williams, a lot of people, that was a knock about Jalen Williams, that he's unathletic, and it's just not the case. He just plays with a lot of pace, and when you play with pace and so much control with the ball in your hands, it can sometimes, sometimes you might miss it. So for me, honestly, Brandon Miller's performances in this tournament after the controversy he had, After the controversy, he came out and had his best game of the
Yep.
season against adversity. I mean, that is the type of mental makeup of a star. You know
It
what I
is.
mean? Like,
It is.
like that guy's mental, in order to be so locked in under this much scrutiny, the facts will be the facts, and it's unfortunate what happened. But his response, I can't help but think about what he's going through mentally and
Mhm.
how he's able to overcome that, right? And be locked in. And honestly, he ignites his team at times. You know what I mean? With his
Yeah.
play. I mean, honestly, it's inspiring. And I think he's shown almost everything I want to see in a prospect, whether it be passing, because the passing reads are really good. He's not going to be it's nowhere near Scoot's level, right?
Right.
But
But at
Jason
6'9",
Tatum
he's a different
scoring.
archetype.
Right, exactly. Like it'll be in the more Jason Tatum type. You know what I mean?
Right.
The way Jason Tatum is able to kick to shooters off his drive and leverage his scoring ability to make others better. Right? He's going to be able to do that. You know what I mean? He has that within him. You can tell he has a high IQ. He has the intangibles at that size. I love his length. I love his defense. He's really good defensively, like really good. You know what I mean? He uses his length well. He's disruptive. He's this isn't talked about enough, but he's an incredible rebounder. He really is. Like that dude, he's going to be a plus on the boards, right? And he just does so many things for your team to help them win. And that's why I say in this tournament, what am I looking for Brandon Miller? I mean, I just expect him to keep doing what he's been doing.
Yeah.
I think these pressure situations are nothing compared to what he's been going through, right? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's why I say I don't know if there's any more that he can tap into rather than creating more space in the mid-range, because they say he's not a three-way player. But I think that's largely due to Nate Oates' system.
Yeah.
No one scores. And if you understand who Brandon Miller was in high school, the knock on Brandon Miller in high school was he didn't take enough threes. He was a mid-range demon. He was killing everybody in the mid-range, right? So if you understand that, right, and then understand Nate Oates' system, you wouldn't be saying these tropes about he's not a three-way scorer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And to your point, during one of the game broadcasts this weekend, Jimmy Dykes, who is the TV analyst for the SEC tournament, mentioned that Oates took a lot of his principles from the Mike D'Antoni era Rockets. So when we're talking about not being a three-level player and focusing on threes and getting to the rim, yeah, that's the system. That's Nate Oates. And you certainly can't criticize Nate Oates for that, by the way, because they're the number one overall seed. They've had a fantastic season. It is clearly working, just as it did when Mike D'Antoni had Chris Paul and James Harden at or near their peak. So I thought that was an interesting Rockets anecdote that got thrown into the broadcast, sort of made me raise my eyebrow. But I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, that actually does make sense with how we're seeing Brandon Miller deployed. And I'm right there with you with regards to his reads getting better throughout the season, his processing speed improved. I thought that even though just comparing the two Missouri Alabama games, because they played them once in early February and Alabama won by about 20. Now, the reason they won by 20, it was a game that Mizzou did not have Kobe Brown. That's Mizzou's best player, potential second round NBA guy. And when he wasn't out there, they're just not the same team. But even though Alabama was much more dominant in that game, as opposed to this one where they had to rally in the second half to get past Mizzou, you could see that Brandon was processing the game a lot quicker. And I think especially, Mizzou's a team with the pace they play at and the trapping that is very difficult to prepare for in a tournament setting where you only have 1 or 2 days. And so you could tell Bama was having some struggles with that, especially in the first half. They got sped up. And so for them to figure it out, and Brandon specifically, because he's the guy, even though he's not a quote unquote point guard, he's the guy operating with the ball in his hands and he's initiating the offense a lot of the time. For them to figure it out on the fly and have the maturity not to get discouraged, that's something that a lot of freshmen are just simply not able to do. So I was really, really impressed. And I say that as someone that's typically bitter when a guy like Brandon Miller beats their team, but I could not help but be impressed by the way he handled himself in that game. And really, that was the only adversity they played. We should point out the SEC is right up there with the Big Ten, the two best conferences in college ball. Well, no, the Big 12's up there too, of course. But yeah, the SEC, Big Ten, Big 12, the three best conferences in college ball. And Alabama went through 3 tournament teams: Mississippi State, Missouri, and Texas A&M, and they destroyed 2 of them. And,
Mhm.
Missouri held them somewhat competitive, but clearly Alabama by about the 8-minute mark of the second half, it's clear they're going to win by about 10 or so, which they did. So just an overall dominant performance. You wonder about teams that are as young as Alabama is, or at least with Brendan Miller leading the way, are they going to have the maturity not to overlook anybody, to bring the level of focus in terms of every element of the game, not just scoring, but passing, defense? Are they going to do that 3 straight games? And they just never had a lull. They were relentless. I think Nate Oates is a great coach, deserves all the credit, but Miller deserves that level of credit as well as a team's best player. It's go-to guy. Paolo, I think you wanted to add something on Brandon Miller.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask like a couple of quick questions, but before that, I think there was a tweet earlier from Draft Dummies on Twitter that reflected on Brandon Miller's improvement throughout the season at the rim, and I think its stats are pretty jarring. First 10 games, he was shooting 42.8% at the rim with 5 dunks. The 23 games since, which is a much bigger sample size, he's at 70.3%
Mhm.
at the rim with 17 dunks. That's a nearly 30% improvement, basically like on at the snap of a finger during the season. I think that's incredibly impressive, and it bodes well for him because he was getting Jabari Smith Jr. comparisons earlier in the year because of his struggles around the rim, and that was quickly just wiped away. That being said, 2 quick questions about Miller, which are, one of them is more Brandon Miller related, the other one's more tailored to the Rockets. You said that he plays at his own pace, and usually that means, change of speeds, being able to play, slowly, in control, and how that sometimes gets confused with lack of athleticism. But you also mentioned that he doesn't look that strong, but he plays like a strong player. Do you think that translates well to the NBA, where in comparison he will be less strong than he is now compared to his competition, that he'll lean on his strength to gain advantages? Do you think that it will translate well?
Yeah, so I think players that play with primary guys who understand pace and play with pace are able to make multiple decisions, and they're not preset and predetermined in what they're going to do. So when guys have pace, it's one of the things that I look for, and that is how you're able to diagnose how the defense is playing you and how to make the right play. So I don't. So I want to make a correction, kind of to what you said. I think he's not afraid of contact, right? But I don't know if he's still not strong, right? And the way he leverages that is encouraging, but he's not going to get foul calls because he's not able to embellish contact without the strength right now. But I think it's encouraging because strength is something that we know every guy gets better at, right? Everybody can improve their strength, and I think he can fill out in a nice enough way. But I like the way that he uses it and leverages his body, right? I like the way that even in the first 10 games, I was low on him because I was like, hey, I like the process by which you're getting your shots at the rim. Like I like how you got to your spot. That's a makeable shot for you. But you have to be a good enough shot maker at the rim to make those shots, right? Because you're not getting wide open, right? You're getting to a point where it's a makeable shot because you're 6'9", right? And you're bigger than everybody. You can use your length, and you're taking shots that are easier for you than there will be for a 6'6" guy, right? And so for Brandon Miller, it was like, well, you got to have that shot making ability at the rim. You have to have it because you're playing at this pace that you need to be able to get to these spots and be able to convert once you get there. And it's really encouraging that he improved that over the course of the season. I still think there's a lot more improvement he needs to make at the rim, but there's more than enough touch there. There's more than enough good things that I've seen to think that he's going to be able to survive in the paint. And I really am interested to see if the spacing will help him kind of unlock more of that downhill force, where we might see a little bit more athleticism in the way that we see Jalen Williams using it. I mean, Jalen Williams is dunking everything. It's like opening the court up for him just opened a whole nother world for his athleticism when he combined it with his change of pace. So I'm just interested to see how that stuff helps him. I think he will struggle early in the league. I think his first year or two, he may struggle finishing around the rim, just because he's not going to be strong enough to get to his spots, and he's going to be forced into a lot of tough shots. I mean, it's similar to the way Brandon Ingram, similar
Yeah,
size,
I could
right?
see that.
Struggled a lot. You see, he get into these spots where, hey, that's a makeable shot for you, but it's still really tough, right? And you're not strong enough to convert in the way that you need to convert. But once you get more polished, once you get stronger, he has to polish his handle some more as well, because I think his handle needs to be improved. But it's good. It's the functionality of it is solid. The basis for me, Jabari Smith in the process, the functionality of his handle was not there for me. A lot of people were thinking Kevin Durant scaling him down. Maybe he could be a 3. That was never in the cards for me. Jabari Smith was always meant to be scaled up as a center. But Brandon Ingram, I think not Brandon Ingram. Brandon Miller is the opposite. I think he is a legitimate wing with legitimate ball skills. And I think I expect him to improve those things. I think those are likely improvements for his outcome.
Right. So I'll make the next few questions just quick fired and just give me a yes or no answer so we can move on to Jarvis Walker. Right. I'm gonna give you is it a concern that he is a year older than most of the other guys in this rank?
No.
He's 20 and not a concern. Okay.
No, and let me just add something to that. For me, how old you are really doesn't matter. It's about, are you ready to play in the league, and will a team know what you are by the end of your rookie contract? That's what it's all about. Okay. Go ahead.
Interesting. The mobility to play small forward at the NBA level rather than the 4 potentially. What you see him as long term, a 3 or 4?
3.
Okay. And last one. A lot of people mention, hey, if it's a top 2 pick, we're drafting him and we're keeping him and we're building around him. And they draw that cutoff at 2. Is Brandon Miller a guy that if you're in a position to take, you say, no, we're not trading this pick. This is a franchise cornerstone level guy. So in order to frame it as a yes or no question, if you're in a position to trade pick 3 for, let's say, LaMelo Ball, yes or no?
Ooh, 3 for LaMelo Ball, I'd trade it. I mean, LaMelo's a proven commodity in this league, and at a position of need for the Rockets, you have to pull the trigger on that.
Yeah, I would.
All right, that's perfect. That's all I wanted to hear.
To go back to the Houston angle, and by the way, to our listeners that have made it with us to this point, this is a special March Madness themed episode. We have not stopped watching the Rockets. We know that especially the rookies of late. Tari Eason went 4-4 on threes against the Bulls. Jabari Smith Jr. is averaging more than 20 and 10 over his last 3 games. So he's showing some very encouraging signs. We'll talk about that in a couple of days. This is our bracket reaction show to sort of get you guys prepped for the NCAA tournament. And when you're watching these guys that could be in play for the Rockets with their own pick this year, if it comes in the 3 through 7 range and are not lucky enough to get Victor or Scoot, then we're getting you prepped for that. And of course, a lot of you that watch the Rockets, you watch the Cougars at the University of Houston as well. And of course, Houston is the number 1 seed, the second overall seed in the tournament behind only Brandon Miller and Alabama. U of H has had a great year, 31-3. They did lose the American Championship game today, but Marcus Sasser did not play because of a groin injury. They expect him to be fine by the time they open up play on Thursday, I believe, against Northern Kentucky. And then Saturday, they'll play the Iowa-Auburn winner, assuming they don't somehow lose to Northern Kentucky, which historically only one 16 seed has ever beaten a 1 in the entire history of this. So it's extremely likely that teams like Alabama and Houston are going to move on at least beyond game 1 and get to where we see them having some very intriguing matchups against high major teams that can legitimately threaten them. Bama would play the winner of Maryland and West Virginia, Houston against the winner of Iowa and Auburn. And one of the things about Jarvis Walker that's really interesting to me, the other guys we talked about with Brandon Miller, Keontae George, Nick Smith Jr., they're either the lead guy for their team when it comes to initiating their offense or very close to it. If they're not the lead guy, they're certainly one of the 2 or 3 high usage guys that try and get things started for their teams. And of course, the teams playing them, the coaches that are drawing up schemes to defend and try and slow down these teams, they're going to be focused on guys like Keontae George and Brandon Miller and Nick Smith Jr. Whereas the Jarris Walker, I'm not going to say that other coaches are not accounting for him. Of course, that's too strong. But U of H has a unique setup in which you've got these very high usage guards between Sasser, Shed, Tremont Mark, that on this particular U of H team, Jarris Walker, and he's a freshman, but he's something of a role player. And yet when we're talking about a guy who has improved his stock to where now he's seen as a potential top 5 pick, I feel like starting the year he was somewhere late lottery, mid first round. Now a lot of guys see him high in the draft, and I think you do as well. But it's sort of interesting because on a U of H team that's this deep and loaded with veterans, it's not just that they're guards, they're veterans as well. Guys like Sasser and Shed that have been there, done that on Final Four, Elite Eight runs in recent seasons. It's tough to sort of evaluate or make an apples to apples comp with Jarris Walker because you're not going to be looking at him the same way. It's not like he's the guy that's going to initiate the offense like a Brandon Miller or Keontae George will. So when people are watching the Cougars and watching Jarris Walker and trying to, I guess, determine what is this guy's path to eventually becoming an NBA star, or at least a very good starter, what can he show in this context with this particular U of H team? Just talk about how he fits in with the group and what it is he needs to show within the confines of an offense that's clearly not built for him to take a ton of shots or be super high usage.
That's a really good question, Ben. That is an excellent question. Because I just watched the game today and where they really struggled, and you really couldn't get any offensive impact out of Jarris, right? And I think it's unfortunate because I think Jarris, as a defensive prospect, in which a lot of us have gotten enough film on him as a defensive prospect. I think that story is already written for him. But as an offensive prospect, that's yet to be told. I mean, I know that Jarris is a high-level processor, high-level connective passer. I think he has some face-up upside. But in the system that he's currently being played in, I mean, Marcus Sasser didn't even play today, and we couldn't get the offense run a bit more through Jarris. You know what I mean? And that's going to be tough when evaluating. Right? Really, how good is he with the ball in his hands at creating for others and for himself? I think there is some face-up upside for him. He's flashed it in some games this season, and that's what I'd be looking for. In the small opportunities that you get, how do you look as a face-up player with the ball in your hands, right? Whether it be, as a post-up or in these certain areas, how do you look? Can you face up? Can you turn? And how competent is the move? It's not a matter of it makes or misses. It's the process by which he's getting to these shots, right? That's what I would, because he's not going to have enough volume for us to glean anything big from it, right? How quick is he using power to get this, or is it finesse, right? And does he convert on the opportunities that he gets as a play finisher, right? Because I think that is the safer outcome for Jarris moving forward. You're going to be this elite switchable Swiss Army knife defender with huge connector upside with your passing, right? But how do you look as a play finisher? Are you a lob threat? Or are you competent in as a short roll big and not just passing, but finishing with your floater? And I think he's already kind of answered some of those questions, but seeing them on the big stage when the pressure is at its highest, right? How is his impact? Do you feel Jarris's impact on this game? Right. I think that is something that you can look for in the NCAA tournament. How much do you feel Jarris's impact and imprint on this game in a lesser role, whether it be by his defense or finishing?
One follow-up on all four of these guys that we've been discussing, the NCAA tournament 4 that could be in play for the Rockets with their own selection in the 2023 draft. I'll preface this by saying that I am a best player available guy. When we were talking about an asset this high, you can't be drafting for fit, especially fit with a team that's currently the worst in the NBA. You've got to maximize the asset. You've got to get the best possible player you can. And if it means you've got to change other parts of the team to get the best out of them or make for the best mix, then you do it. Because these assets like Jalen 2 years ago, Jabari in 2022, and whatever you do with your pick this year, that's far more important than, the second tier players that you have around them. Those you can change. You can make trades. Rockets going to have all this cap room this summer. You can bring in veterans. You can use them in different ways. You can bring in a new coaching staff. There's all sorts of things you can do to sort of change the mix, the fit, how they're deployed. I think you've just got to get the pick right and worry about everything else later. With that
Right.
said, just from a purely aesthetics perspective, with the group as it's currently constructed, in terms of not just Jalen and Jabari, but also the other guys from young core, Alperen Şengün, KJ Martin, Kevin Porter Jr., Tari Eason, so on and so forth, which of those four would have the more seamless fit immediately to help the Rockets within the next couple of years?
Yeah, Brandon Miller.
Okay.
Brandon, hands down, Brandon Miller. We're not talking about Scoot, right? We're talking about
Yeah, within the
down.
NCAA tournament
Yes.
four. Yes.
Right, within the NCAA, yes, hands down, Brandon Miller. I mean, Brandon Miller, you can plug him in right now at the 3. Go get a real point guard in free agency, right? Whether that be James Harden or not, and he could come in. Brandon Miller can come in right now and play a 3-and-D role. Right now, he could be a long defender at the 3, right? Yeah, at the 3, and then you can run him off movement pick and rolls, and movement pin downs to shoot, and he could be a floor spacer, right? And then you can explore his primary skills and see how much he can take on, right? But you can slow roll Brandon Miller just as a 3-and-D player, 3-and-D wing. I mean, he could be Trey Murphy, as a lower end outcome. You know what I mean? So, but that is the allure of Brandon Miller at 6'9" with that wingspan, with that level of shooting. Even if he's not the primary guy you hope him to be, he's going to be a high level starter.
The one guy that's in this same mix that we haven't touched on is Cam Whitmore, because, of course, Villanova did not make the NCAA field. As we're recording this, the NIT field is yet to be released. I think Villanova will certainly be invited. It's just a matter of whether they accept it. Some teams that disappoint choose to just move on to the next season. We've already heard from North Carolina, one of the first 4 out of the NCAA tournament. They're not going to accept an NIT berth. They just want to turn the page and move forward. We'll see what Villanova does. But the bottom line is, even if they play in the NIT, obviously those games, the opponents are just not going to be anywhere near the stakes of the NCAA matchups. But when you compare those 4 to Cam, who I think is the only other guy that conceivably, if he has a strong pre-draft process with his workouts, his interviews, the combine, so on and so forth, that could potentially play his way into that mix. Where does Cam fit in? Can he possibly jump some of these guys? Just talk about your view of him, even though, sadly, we're not going to get to see him in an NCAA tournament environment.
Right. So for me, Cam Whitmore is an incredible athlete with some ball skills. He's primarily a 2-level scorer, and he likes to really kind of bully his way to the rim. But my biggest issue with Cam is to me, I was hoping he'd be around the 6'7", 6'8" range, and he's more 6'6", right? And that to me limits his versatility, as positional versatility. And I was viewing his best position as a 4 in a similar mold of Miles Bridges. He's 6'8". He has the similar athleticism, shot profile, can shoot. He leans more that. Now because of his size, because he's shorter, I worry about him holding up full time as a 4, and that pushes him to the wing spot, whether it be the 3 or the 2. And at the wing spot, I don't know if Cam has the ball skills to succeed at that spot. And one of my biggest knocks on Cam is Cam has tunnel vision. He doesn't even look to find guys and make others better out of his drives, which he's so dynamic at doing. You know what I mean? He's really playing bully ball, and it's a one-track mind for Cam. And that, with his limited ball skills, I think he has good enough functional handle where to get better. But I just haven't seen a well-rounded game to be a wing, a consistent wing with a superstar level upside that I would want to see compared to the rest of these guys. And that's why Cam kind of falls lower on my board. Right now, Cam's 8, and it's because of that, the lack of positional versatility. He's smaller, and he hasn't created for others at a high enough clip for me to think that he has superstar upside.
It's very
Or
interesting.
for me to bet on his super. I think he has star upside. I mean, those tools are, speak for themselves, but he just hasn't shown the things that I want to see out of a guy that I would bet on to be a star in this league.
That's very interesting. I actually agree. I think one of the things that turns me off about Cam Whitmore that didn't before is he doesn't have the body to play the 4, and I
Right.
cannot project him to play anything else other than 4 based on what we've seen so far. I actually also wanted to comment on what you brought up about Miller in a scenario where Harden also comes in. That's really interesting, and I hadn't thought about it in that frame of mind before. That's just such an exciting way of going into the next year, just because the way Harden's setting up shots for guys like what's the shooter that Philly had that I'm missing the name right now, Georges Niang. I think Brandon Miller could just slot into all of those plays that he already runs just so well, and Harden has just those little weird ways of concealing passes that the team's obviously running a play for a shooter coming off a screen, but Harden sometimes it even looks unaware, and he gets an extra second for those guys. And I think Brandon Miller, considering his jump shot right now is not as as quick as it probably will be when he's in his prime, I think he'll get. I think he'd fit perfectly into that role, especially if James Harden comes in. That being said, I wanted to transition this into one of the biggest questions coming in this year, where you've got Wemby who's playing in France, we've got Scoot who's playing in the G League, who we've already seen a little bit of a sample size when it comes to Jalen Green and Jonathan Kuminga and Dyson Daniels and those guys. We've seen a little bit of prospects coming out of the G League now. The big question is overtime elite with Amen Thompson and Alstar Thompson, who are projected to be top 10 picks, I think for sure. And personally, and I want your 2 cents on this as well, I think that the competition level just isn't anywhere close. I watch them play, and it feels like they're playing against kids, and sometimes they are. Sometimes they're playing against 16-year-olds. It feels like just the way the defenses these guys face aren't posing the problems that they're going to have to face in the NBA. I think size is something that lacks severely in that league. I think they get to the rim at will, not only because of their speed and athleticism, but once they actually get to the rim, they're not contested at a level that scales up to NBA competition whatsoever. I don't think they're facing rim protecting centers nearly as often as they should have. And there just seems like there's so much space on the floor at all times. It really feels, and some of it is their size. They are 6'7" guys that have a handle that kind of can play like a point guard and a ball handler. That's a part of it. But it feels like everything's just so wide open all the time. How do you compare? And that's why I struggle having Amen Thompson as a guy at 3 after than Miller clearly there. But how do you compare overtime elite to college, to the G League, and even to the French league where Victor plays?
Yeah, no, it's the worst, one of the worst leagues I've ever seen, competition wise. It is terrible, honestly. And one of the reasons it always looks up and down to you, Paulo, is they have this weird rule in the league that, whenever there's an out of bounds or a foul in the NBA, you have to give it to the ref, and the ref has to give it to you, and then you can go out. In their league, you can just grab it and go as if somebody made a shot, right? Which artificially creates these fast break opportunities where guys are just getting it and going. And it creates all these transition opportunities, right? And you rarely get to see these guys playing the half court. There's no real scheme system occurring here. It's worrisome. I decided, but this is what I will say. They played some other teams outside of the league, whether it be Mega and some other pro league teams, European league teams. I think it was like 36ers, I believe, or something like that. And then they played a team in the preseason. It was on Creighton's floor. It was called like they were called like the Blue Chips or something like that. But they were full of basically G League level guys who played who had played in the G League or professionally at some times, right? And I watched that game, and that was one of the worst games they had on their film. Now, we'll give the caveat that that game was last summer, and it was before, and they've gotten a lot better since then. That was before they've made the mechanical changes in their jump shot. But I will say it was rough. Those guys were clearly not afraid of them. They were way more polished. You could tell they knew the game at a whole nother level, and they really were just honestly just scoring so easily on them. And the guards had a really hard time getting past them. Now they were against NBA level guards who crowded their space. Their handles looked very fickle, right? I think their handles need real work. They're not going to be able to handle ball pressure immediately. Okay. Asur and Amin are different. They really are different players because Asur plays the game at a much slower pace, and Amin is 100 miles per hour. Okay. It's so funny, and people say, oh, this one is more, he's a better athlete or has a better first step. And I'm just like, well, I just think I haven't decided yet, but Asura might just be playing at a different pace, honestly, because I think that Amin plays too fast. But I will say this about Amin. Amin sees angles much better than Asar. He sees shifts in the defense, holes within the defense at a whole nother level, and it allows him to have more creativity in his drives and his passes, right? And so his vision of how to get to spots is better, right? But I don't think he's necessarily that much better than Asor. And I say that because I believe Asor has much more promise on his jump shot. If you look at Asor's jump shot from the summer to where it is now, he's completely changed that form. He's added touch to it. And honestly, I think he's put in an incredible amount of work, which is really encouraging to see from a prospect. But as far as the level of competition, it's hard to get a clear evaluation. I think they will struggle in the half court, and I think they'll struggle with the games not going up and down. And I think their handles are not as good as advertised. I honestly do. Mm-hmm. And I think they're projects. And that's why those guys are squarely behind Brandon Miller and Keontae George. I have them 5 and 6 at the moment. And it's because you can't get a clear evaluation against, good enough competition. And I think they have clear holes. Like I say, Amin sees angles and uses those angles, but he's moving too fast. He's moving too fast for himself at times, right? And I think Asar just tries to use his athleticism to finish through people sometimes. Like he just, I'm bigger and stronger than you. I'm just going to finish through you. And none of that stuff is going to fly at the next level. It's like none of it's going to fly. And I think they're projects. I really do. But it doesn't change the upside that those guys have. They have sky high level upsides. And that's why you cannot let those guys fall outside of the top 10. That's just why.
Yeah, the way I look at it is that the NCAA tournament just gives you more high-level data points when it comes to it's a small sample, but it's very useful from the standpoint of seeing how they perform against coaches and other teams who are throwing the kitchen sink at those guys. Because the one thing with these other leagues, well, it's not applicable to Victor because obviously he's playing in a professional setting, but even like with the G League Ignite, there's not necessarily a focus on the team result. There's a lot of guys that are out there for the most part to try and go and get numbers because everyone's trying to advance themselves to the next level. It's about the individual rather than the collective. And your point about Scoot going up against grown men and Jalen Green did the same thing 2 years ago. Yeah, that is important, even if it's individual focused. At the same time, look, these are professionals. There's value in that as well. But where I think the NCAA tournament is uniquely valuable is there's so much money involved that these coaches, these staffs, they're trying everything they can to actually win these games. They have it in themselves, not just to focus on maximizing the output of their guys, but to slow down any perceived strength of the other team. So guys like Brandon and Keontae and Jarris Walker and Nick Smith Jr., they're going to get the kitchen sink thrown at them. And there's a lot of value in seeing how guys respond to that. I know it was a little thing, but a year ago, look, we all saw Paolo Banchero put Duke on his back and take them to the Final Four. We saw the second round game against Michigan State was the one that really opened my eyes to how he just took over that game with 8 minutes left when it was easily could have gone either way. Whereas Jabari Smith Jr. in Auburn and Chet Holmgren of Gonzaga, they both went out relatively early, the second and third rounds. Now, it's not all on them. There's other things that go into it. With Chet, he got in just foul trouble, some controversial calls, and could barely even stay on the court, although you could argue that's something to watch out for. I would say personally that college basketball officials are way too aggressive on some of the fouling things, also 5 fouls instead of 6. So I think some of that talk was overdone. But the bottom line is Paolo's NCAA tournament, even in a smallish sample of 4 or 5 games, I do think it left a mark. Similarly, Christian Braun of the Nuggets, he was a guy who wasn't even on the first round radar of most mocks that I looked into before the tournament, but he played a key role on the Kansas team that won the national championship. And before you know it, he's in pretty much the middle of the first round at 21st overall to Denver. And he's had a really good rookie season. I was really impressed by some plays he made late in the game today. Nuggets barely lost to the Nets, but they had a hell of a comeback with Christian Braun playing a key role in that late in the fourth quarter. So it's an interesting dynamic, whereas it is a small sample. And as with anything, you don't want to overreact to 3 or 4 games. There's a lot more data points than that. At the same time, the NCAA tournament gives you more certainty. If you see a guy that goes out and performs on that stage and does well, then you just feel a little bit better about what the downside risk is, as opposed to the Thompsons. The bottom line is, yes, the skills are there, the upside is there. There's just a little more downside risk based on the environment they're coming from. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. But also, like, we have a history of evaluating prospects at the NCAA level. We kind of know what it means, the pros and cons of watching an NCAA game, what changes, how they translate to that level, and we just don't know that about overtime just yet, right? It's a fairly new system.
I guess
and
that's
I think
fair
these were
too. We don't
yeah,
really know.
Right. We don't know how, prospects historically fare when making that type of jump. And that's scary. You know what I mean? Like that's scary. I think the G League, people could at least lean on the fact that these were professionals they were going against. They were learning NBA level systems. And I think we've kind of transitioned to understand that the G League is more developmental oriented. So it's not going to be all the way about numbers. It's going to be about doing the things that make you better, so you'll be better in the long run. Like Dyson Daniels fixing his shot, the mechanics on his shot. That wasn't good for his 3-point percentage, right? But that was good for him in the long term in his development, right? So it's these different approaches that you also have to look at from these leagues from that lens. And right now, I don't know that overtime, any of the approaches that overtime has taken, bodes well for scouting. You know what I mean? Like right now, like
Yeah.
I don't know. The only thing that I can say is that they shoot from an NBA 3-point line, right?
Yeah.
But the level of defense is just non-existent.
Yeah.
I mean, guys are
It just
lackadaisical out there.
The bottom line, it just seems very unpredictable. That's
Yes.
the way that I would look at it. And so while you can't deny the upside, you can't not consider it, especially if you get to 5, 6, somewhere like that. And the other guys that you're looking at from the college ranks seem to have more of a clear ceiling. At the same time, it's just one of those things where if you see one of these college guys go out over the next few weeks and really put on a show and excel against high level competition, it just makes me feel a lot better about how projectable they are, as opposed to just the uncertainty of the overtime elite environment. And, we're still sort of learning on the fly how all of that's going to translate. The last question for me, Madison, and by the way, for anyone listening who's not already following Madison on Twitter, do so at Madman Leaks. He's a great follow, and he's only going to become more valuable over the coming weeks as we start transitioning more to draft talk, getting ready for the draft lottery in May. And of course, wherever the Rockets land after the lottery, they'll then pick in late June. And Madison's going to be a great resource to help you prep for that. You did a good job laying out tiers earlier. You explained why Miller clearly is not only next up for you after Victor and Scoot, but you actually mentioned that he's analogous to Paolo Banchero, from a year ago, and that if this was a weaker draft, he could easily be a number
Hmm.
one overall type guy.
Hmm.
And perhaps you could throw Cade Cunningham into that same bucket from a year previous. That the bottom line is the top of this year's draft with Victor and Scoot, it's just really, really strong. It doesn't mean that the guy after them is necessarily weaker. So I think it's pretty clear that you view Miller as in the same type ballpark tier as guys that went at the top of the last couple of drafts, which is great to hear because if we consider the top 3 picks and not the top 2, the Rockets basically have a 40% chance of getting in the top 3. So that all of a sudden is looking a lot more healthy in terms of their probabilities. I want to ask you about the other guys though, in terms of, and just generally speaking here, talking about Keontae, Jarris Walker, Nick Smith Jr., the Thompson twins, Cam Whitmore. Where do they fit in relative to guys in that 4, 5, 6 mix from the last couple of years? I think 2021 was really strong with Scotty Barnes and Jalen Suggs in that tier. Last year, it felt a bit weaker, but honestly, I mean, there's some guys, Keegan Murray, Ben Mathurin, Jaden Ivey have had moments in their rookie years. Do you see this? It sounds like what you're saying is definitely 1 and 2 are a bit stronger this year. I think everybody views that as the case. And
Hmm.
3 is probably stronger as well on a comparative
Hmm.
basis, or maybe it's similar to 2021 because Evan Mobley was a really strong number 3 pick. Let's be honest about that.
Hmm.
In terms of that 4 through 7 range, is it the same as the last couple of years, or is it maybe a little bit worse? Because when I look back, those are some pretty big shoes to fill. And we're talking about guys like Scotty Barnes, Jalen Suggs, and then the guys a year ago, Mathurin, Keegan. Who am I forgetting that was at 5? Oh, yeah, Jaden Ivey. I don't know why I keep forgetting Ivy. Where do you see the rest of those guys after Brandon Miller relative to, say, the 4 through 6 range from the last couple of years?
Yeah, so I think it's tough because the Thompson twins just always feel like wild cards to me because their ceilings are so high, it kind of fools you. But I don't know if I would have them ahead of say Dyson Daniels, right? Where I think I
Yeah,
had
that's
a
another one.
more, yeah, right, a more solid. So Dyson Daniels, I think was 5 on my board or 4 on my board last year, 4 or 5. No, I think it might have been 5, and then 6 was the guy in Indiana. I'm
Mathurin.
sorry, I'm having Mathurin, right? And so those, but I was really happy with them as 5, 6 candidates, right? And the uncertainty of the Thompson twins really messes this up for me because I'm not sure about their evaluations, right? They have these sky high upsides, but I think they have a lot of inherent risk involved as well. And so that being said, if we average it out, I think it's about the same, right? I think it's about the same. It's within the same range. I think Jarris Walker, Scotty Barnes as prospects are not too far off from each other, right?
Okay,
As
that's encouraging.
prospects, right?
Yeah,
I think Scotty
that's
Barnes
encouraging.
is for sure overachieved already as as a young guy in this league. But I think
Mhm.
Jarris Walker, it can be seen as
In that same
the third
class.
best player, right? The
Mhm.
third best player on a championship team as a defensive connector, right? That does all the dirty
Interesting.
work that is Dennis Rodman esque,
Mhm.
right? That is Draymond Green esque, right? But this is not going to be your second or third, first or second best player on your team. But he very well could be that Swiss Army like defensive anchor that just
Okay.
makes everything work in a similar way that Bam does for Miami. You know what I mean? And so when you start to take those things into consideration, I definitely think that it matches up. It's okay, but I just worry. The Thompson twins worry me. They really do. But the back end of the lottery through the teens, I do think is pretty high quality. I think there's some sure things in that end of the Clippers pick range. I think there's some sure things that Rockets fans would be happy to get if they don't trade that pick.
Yeah, for sure. I actually really agree with you. I tweeted earlier today that I thought that this would be a great class for you to start a rebuild on, because there's a lot of high upside guys that you could take a swing on later in the lottery, or late lottery, as I said, late lottery to early 20s. You've got KT Jackson. If he, a lot of these guys could just not stay in the draft. given that people say that next year's draft class is not that good and they could, bet on themselves because they haven't had great years. But T.T. Jackson, Derek Lively or Lively, I've never get his name right. Ryan Rupert, even Derek Whitehead, who had struggles earlier in the season. I think all of you have some really, interesting prospects later in the first round. My next question, actually leading into it, is there anybody currently outside of your top 7 or top 8 that you could see in the NCAA tournament make a jump and get in the mix with Nick Smith Jr., with Keontae George, with all of these guys, the Thompson twins, etc. And before you go, let me actually answer the question myself, because I have a guy in specific that I was thinking of when I came across this question. I think if Kyle Filipowski has an injury or something, I think Derek Whitehead, if he gets more responsibility, given the context that he's currently playing sub 20 minutes on this team, but on that low volume, he's currently shooting 41 or 42% from three. He started off the season with an injury, a broken foot, I'm pretty sure. Didn't play a lot of the early games, or when he played, it was really little. If he stays in this draft class, and if Duke, for some reason, has to go to him with a lot more usage, and he delivers, given that he is going to be 18 years old when he's drafted, given that we usually say that the NCAA tournament is a low sample size, for him, given how much he missed earlier in the year, the NCAA tournament would actually be a pretty big sample size when he as a percentage of what his entire season would be. If he comes in as an 18-year-old with all the tools, and he becomes that number one option for Duke and carries them to, on say the Final Four while carrying them if there's an injury in the first round or something like that, I could totally see him becoming one of those guys that teams will be looking to take a shot at, even in the top 10, because I think he was touted to have that potential going into the draft class, and then with injuries, it just derailed him. I think he's one of those guys that Duke's one injury away from having to turn to him heavily, and if they do, he could really take advantage of it.
I mean, I completely agree with that. I mean, the injury zapped a lot of his athleticism, but it seems to be coming back slowly but surely. And if he gets the opportunity, because of his preseason pedigree, I think a lot of teams will be very comfortable with him entering those conversations. Another guy I would say is Jalen Hood-Schifino, who will have the opportunity to separate himself from a lot of the point guard prospects. And I think that Jalen Hood-Schifino has he's high usage. He's incredibly smart, and he carves up drop coverage. Okay. Right now, he's a killer in the mid range, but he's an excellent passer, can make every read out of the pick and roll. He really his gameplay reminds me offensively of, so D'Angelo Russell's operation out of the pick and roll, how he handles drop coverage, the passing, right? It's very reminiscent to me of how Jalen Hood-Schifino plays offense. But then you add that he's a 6'6", incredible point of attack defender, like excellent defender, excellent body. He's like 215, you know what I mean? NBA ready body with that offensive skill set combined with the defense, right? Two-way player. If he shows that he can go out and really carve defenses up with both his passing and scoring, and he's had some of those. Remember, I was talking about that getting hot. He's been inconsistent from three, but he's gotten hot in a couple games where he's 35 plus. He carved Purdue up. Right? And he has some games where he's gotten on an absolute heater from three and just killed people in the drop. And so if he can get in that type of zone during the NCAA tournament, he can for sure enter the top 10 and enter, the top 6-7 conversation as the second best point guard in this draft. And I think he'll have the opportunity to do it, right? Things got to go Derek's way for him to do that, but he'll have the opportunity.
And by the way, to your point on the kid from Indiana, that's a really interesting draw. They're the 4 seed in the Midwest. They open with Kent State, and they'd face the Miami Drake winner, likely Miami as the 5. If Indiana can advance to the Sweet 16, then they're looking at a matchup in all likelihood with Houston, the 1 seed, in which case, it wouldn't be a direct matchup with Jarris Walker, of course. What you would see is how he performs going up against perhaps the best defensive team in the country when
Right.
they're dialed in, and guards like Marcus Sasser and Jamal Shed that just, they will get in your grill. They will play physical the way almost no college teams will. And so if he goes out on that stage and performs, that's the sort of thing that can turn heads, right?
Exactly. That, and one of his weaknesses is he doesn't deal with ball pressure very well because he has such a slow and methodical pace, right? And can really get caught up with that ball pressure. But if he goes out there and carves out the best defense in the nation, the most physical defense, and arguably should be the number 1 team in the nation, right? In this bracket, that's the type of stuff that can vault you into another tier of prospect for scouts. So I think he's the most prime right now to go and take those, to take that reins and actually move up those. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying he will.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not saying he will.
Keep your eyes peeled for it. Yeah.
Exactly. And and that guy I'm really high on. I've been high on him for most of the year. I actually have him already as my second best point guard prospect, right above Kaysen. At number 10 on my list, because I just think guards with that level of passing and ball skills just don't fail. And I think he might not be able to shoot it for the first 2-3 years from 3, but he's shown that he can, and once he improves, he'll be fine. He'll be a starter level guard, high level guard.
Well, that's everything on my list. Paolo, are you good to wrap up here? Or is there anything else you wanted to ask before we close out?
Nah, I'm good. I actually came out of this a lot higher on Brandon Miller than I was before. I'm actually really looking forward to. It used to be a top 2 or bust, but a scenario of James Harden and Brandon Miller is really appealing to me right now.
Yeah,
I'd be fine. I'd be fine with Brandon Miller, honestly. I just feel like, hey, forget it, man. I mean, I think he's a top tier prospect. I really do.
Yeah, I will say, as someone that watches a lot of SEC basketball, the way they carved up teams for 3 straight days. Well, in fairness to my Missouri Tigers, again, they didn't exactly carve them up, but had to really work to grind out that victory, and then just took Mississippi State and Texas A&M to the woodshed pretty much on 3 consecutive days. That's the kind of attention to detail that younger teams led by the likes of Brandon Miller, who within the past month in particular has gone through a ton of adversity, as you mentioned, Madison. That was really, really impressive. That turned my head in a big way, seeing how he performed on that stage against big time competition. And as I can see it, there's no reason to think that that's not going to continue, at least for, the first few rounds. Now, who knows what happens when we get to the, Sweet 16, especially Elite 8, and everybody you play is elite at that point, then, or for the most part they are, then if you lose, then you lose. But at that point, there's no shame in that. I think at least for the foreseeable future, boy, Alabama looks good. Brandon Miller's leading the way. And yeah, that's a scenario. And all of a sudden, again, it's still less than 50-50, but if we include the number 3 pick, then you're looking at 41% shot of the Rockets, assuming they finish in the bottom 3, which I think is a very safe bet. They're currently tied with the Pistons for the fewest wins at 15. And I think there's like a 6-game gap between them and Charlotte for the 4 spot. Spoiler alert, that's not being made up. So, the Rockets are going to have the maximum odds. And so if we're looking at it not just in 27%, but all of a sudden, if we start saying, hey, it's a 41% chance, that starts looking a lot healthier. And if we consider Brandon Miller, maybe he's not quite at the Scoot Henderson tier, but if we start looking at him and saying, hey, this is a legitimate guy that's analogous to top picks from the last couple of years, and most years for that matter, then I think Rockets fans would feel a lot better about this not being, a 2-star draft, but potentially a 3-star draft. And I think that's a pretty optimistic note to end on. Anyway, for those who made it throughout this nearly hour and a half show, I thank you. We will be talking Rockets in a few days. Again, we are watching. We know that Jabari Smith Jr. has had a really good run of form the last week or so. Hopefully that continues. Tari Eason, his 3-point stroke against the Bulls looked really nice. We'll pick this up in a few days. You can also check out my Locked on Rockets today with Jackson Gatlin, where we talked about Jabari's breakout and also some of the trends with Kevin Porter Jr., the incident that went viral when he sort of pulled the James Harden, put his hands on his hips and checked out of a possession, put himself 30 feet away. We had some nice back and forth debate. So if you want more micro game by game, you can check out today's Locked on Rockets. And then Paolo and I will be back later this week to talk about those trends, and we'll see if they sustain themselves. Rockets have pretty high profile week coming up. All the games are at home with the Celtics on Monday, the Lakers on Wednesday, pair of games against the Pelicans over the weekend. So we'll see how this team fares against some, if not upper echelon opponents, well, Boston is, but in terms of the others, at least high profile opponents across the board. So it should be interesting to see some of these matchups, and we'll pick that up as we get back into more Rockets micro here at the Logger Line over the next few days. Anyway, this is where we will break for today, this being our special March Madness themed episode. If you want more content before our next show, the best place to get it is on Twitter. I'm on there at Ben Dubose. Paolo is on there at Paolo Alves NBA, and Madison is on there at Madman Leaks. Beyond that, you can follow this show, The Logger Line, at The Logger Line on Twitter. That's where you can find our link tree. And beyond simply accessing the show, it's got the links to Apple, Google, Spotify, all of our distributors. You can also find links to our friends, our sponsors, our partners, Carbach Brewing, Sports Talk 790, Rockets Wire. If you go to The Logger Line on Twitter and hit up our link tree, you can find links and check out the content from our partners and sponsors as well. We would definitely appreciate you for doing that. With that, we'll bring this to a close. For Madison and Paolo, I'm Ben. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode of The Logger Line.